Welcome to the Introduction to the CISCO Agent Desktop Training course. In this module, we will go over our telephone and communication system, which you'll be using every day as an agent here at eHealth. CISCO Agent Desktop, or CAD, is a computer telephony integration solution designed specifically for contact centers like we have here at eHealth. CAD contains powerful tools that help increase our agents' and supervisors' productivity. CAD features an intuitive interface and thus makes it easy for you to use. In this module, you will learn how to operate CAD as well as your CISCO phone so that you can take advantage of the many features that will make your job easier as you communicate with your customers. More specifically, you will learn how to launch your CISCO communicator phone and CAD and log in using specific login credentials. This also includes learning how to properly log out of and close CAD when required. We will go over the interface and you will learn how to navigate through the various functions. We will show you how to receive inbound calls through the system as well as how to make outbound calls, including using the built-in phone book utility. Furthermore, we will introduce you to call features that you will be using on a daily basis, such as how to place a call on hold, how to join multiple calls to create a conference call, and how to transfer a call to another party. When we introduce you to a new tool, we will follow a specific outline in order to maximize your ability to learn the tool and be able to successfully use it as you transition from the training to a production environment. First, we will introduce you to the tool and explain how the tool functions. We will then allow you to practice within a simulated environment until you feel you are able to successfully demonstrate how to use it. At that time, we will assess your ability to use the tool by having you demonstrate all required functions or tasks that you will be required to master as an eHealth agent. We will provide you with enough time to complete the module successfully and move on to the next training module or course. So let's get started. Every morning when you start your shift, you will need to launch your phone and CAD and log in to be able to receive or make calls. The first step is to launch your CISCO IP communicator, which is also known as a soft phone. This is a software version of an actual telephone and allows you to use all the regular phone's features from your computer's desktop. To launch your phone, simply click on the CISCO IP communicator icon on your desktop. In order for this to work, you must have your USB headset plugged in. You may initially see the following message displayed. The audio tuning wizard ensures that your audio system is configured correctly. Follow the prompts on the screen and then click Next. Now make sure that all your audio devices are listed as Logitech USB headset. If they are not, make sure your headset is plugged in correctly. Next, click Play to ensure that you are hearing the test sound. If you do, click Next. If you do not, please contact IT Desktop Support at the numbers displayed on the screen. Next, ensure that your microphone is working properly by clicking on Test and speaking into your headset microphone. If everything is working, click on Next. Otherwise, contact Desktop Support. At this point, click Finish and wait for the IP communicator to launch. Once all your audio tools are set up, the phone will launch. This may take a moment. You know that your phone is ready when you see the current time and date, as well as your phone number and extension on the display. Before we have you practice making an outbound call, let us first review what we have learned so far. First, place yourself in a Not Ready status by clicking the Not Ready button. Then select the appropriate reason code. In this case, it is reason 12, which is manual outbound calls. Then, click on the Make a Call icon to bring up the dial pad. Now, within the dial pad, either manually dial a number by entering it using your keyboard. Now make sure that your cursor is in the appropriate field, or by using the built-in number pad or calling a pre-programmed number using the Medicare phone book. Okay, it's time you practice making outbound calls now. You have the opportunity to practice all 4 methods of making a call, which are typing the phone number using your keyboard, using the number buttons of the dial pad, calling a pre-programmed number from the Medicare phone book, and calling a previously called number. Again, please follow the prompts on the screen.
Hello? Hello? Is there anyone there?
Welcome to the Wage and Hour Compliance Responsibilities Training for Managers. My name is Mario, and I will be your guide as you complete this training module. As a company, Acme Widgets has an obligation to meet all federal and state labor regulations and laws. The purpose of this training course is to go over those laws and regulations that apply to the definition and payment of overtime, as directed by the Federal Overtime Law, which is also known as the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA. This is required compliance training for all Acme managers and supervisors. As someone with managerial or supervisory responsibilities, your job will most likely include approving time cards or authorizing overtime. It is therefore important to know how the laws apply to your organization or department here at Acme. After completing this course, you will be able to list the requirements of the Fair Labor Standards Act as they pertain to defining and paying overtime. You'll also be able to explain the difference between non-exempt and exempt status and eligibility under FLSA requirements. Furthermore, you'll be able to define the rules of the 40-hour work week and overtime under the FLSA requirements, and you will be able to explain the manager's role in exercising those FLSA requirements. And finally, you'll be able to also clarify consequences of non-compliance and know how to avoid them. So let's get started. There are two sections in this course. The first section is about the law as it pertains to wage, hours, and overtime. After all, it is important to understand the law. First, we will talk about what FLSA is. Then, we will build upon that and talk about why it is important to Acme. Next, we will discuss the law as it pertains to overtime. And finally, we will go over your responsibilities as someone that approves time for company employees. What is the FLSA? The Fair Labor Standards Act is the federal law that addresses minimum wage, work hours, overtime, and child labor. It also addresses the employer's obligation to keep detailed records. It is important to understand FLSA regulations. Non-compliance with the law can result in penalties, loss of federal contractor status, and/or legal costs. If an audit determines that an FLSA violation has occurred, the company is liable and subject to fines or penalties. This is true even if an employee behaved with the very best of intentions and did not realize that the law had been violated. Many states also have wage and hour laws that often differ from federal law. Employers are required to comply with the law or contract provision most beneficial to the employee, so state laws and labor contracts can supersede the FLSA. The federal government has a website dedicated to the Fair Labor Standards Act. You can access the site by going to www.dol.gov/WHD/FLSA. Now, why don't you go ahead and click on the link above the image on the right to access the site so that you can familiarize yourself with it. So what is your role of responsibility? As a manager or supervisor here at Acme Widgets, you have certain responsibilities to not only understand Acme's policies, but also to adhere to the law and associated regulations. Let's meet George. George is a manager in his company's payroll division. He has currently 12 employees that he's responsible for. As a manager, George has the responsibility to ensure that all overtime pay policies are known and reinforced in his organization. There is a lot that he is responsible for. Just like you, George needs to first understand the policies. While this is a good start, it is simply not enough. As a manager, he is also accountable for complying with the law and keeping accurate descriptions of all exempt and non-exempt positions, especially as job descriptions change. These descriptions help determine if an employee is exempt or non-exempt and therefore eligible for overtime. Well, that seems like a lot of balls to juggle. Now let's take a look at what compliance with overtime means. For this, let's access the Department of Labor's website. To do so, simply click on the image right here on the page. Now take a moment and read the information presented on the site, specifically as it deals with overtime pay. And by the way, if you have any questions about this topic, this site is always a great place to get the answers. As a manager, you are responsible for ensuring that all hours worked are recorded accurately, including time spent on travel, time spent being on call, and time where an employee works during lunch. Now, meal breaks usually mean that no work is being done, but as a time approver, you cannot assume that this is always true. Supervisors may be tempted to code an automatic pay deduction for meal breaks. The employee may decide to use the time to catch up on work or complete a task while eating at their desk or station. If an employee does work during meal times, they must be paid for the time under the law. It is your responsibility as a manager or supervisor to make sure that any work during meal break is recorded and paid per the FLSA law. As a manager or supervisor, you are accountable for accurate timesheets and payroll records. Failure to keep accurate records can cause problems in the event of a Department of Labor audit. It is not legal to allow an employee to work off the clock or omit overtime records, even if the overtime is not authorized. This can have serious consequences. Simply stated, all work must be recorded and all overtime work must be paid. As a manager or supervisor, you are responsible for maintaining accurate job descriptions. Let's take a look at this case study. Susan supervised 2 accounting clerks who were eligible for overtime. Because Susan supervised 2 full-time employees, her position was considered exempt and not eligible for overtime. Due to a reorganization, the accounting clerks were reassigned to other departments. Susan remained in her current job. She was assigned some of the accounting duties performed by the previous clerks. Now, Susan doesn't have an accounting degree, and one is not necessary to complete her job responsibilities. But because Susan's job no longer includes supervisory responsibilities, she became eligible for overtime. But her job title was never changed. Susan's record indicated she was not eligible for overtime, but in her new job, she is eligible. If Susan worked any overtime in her new role, she would not receive overtime pay because her job classification was based on her previous role. As a manager or supervisor, you are responsible to manage your employees' schedules. You're also responsible to control overtime costs. It is important that managers and supervisors communicate clearly that all overtime must be pre-approved. But under FLSA law, if an employee has worked overtime, ACME must pay for the hours worked, even if the time was not pre-approved. This is another reason why accurate records are so important. Employees who repeatedly work overtime without approval are subject to disciplinary action. As a manager or supervisor, you are responsible for knowing and reinforcing the company policies and the policies of your department. It is a good idea to review ACME's overtime policy on a regular basis. You will find it on the Human Resources page on the Employee Portal. Let's discuss some of the potential consequences of not complying with the law. As we discussed earlier, accurate timesheets is an important responsibility. Poor time recording practices may lead to significant legal costs, as is the payment of liquidated damages. Liquidated damages may be calculated as a multiple of wages owed. For example, if a court finds an employee earned but was not paid for $5,000 in overtime, the employer may be required to pay the employee the $5,000 plus an additional $5,000 in liquidated damages. Employers automatically bear the burden of proving any exemption under FLSA. This can result in significant lawyers' fees. If any audit turns up irregularities, civil and criminal penalties may include fines and/or imprisonment. Here's a simple tip for you. Never instruct a non-exempt employee to leave worked hours off their time card. Now that you know what your responsibilities are under the law, we turn our attention to how the law impacts overtime. Before we can begin, let us first define who is eligible for overtime and who is not. Well, jobs are classified as either exempt or non-exempt. In jobs considered non-exempt, overtime must be paid. If a job is not eligible for overtime, it is considered exempt and the overtime laws do not apply. Corporate compensation determines if a position is exempt or non-exempt based on a job description submitted by the manager. The job description is reviewed according to a set of standards under FLSA and categorized as either exempt or non-exempt. Now here at Acme, hourly production employees and employees in levels 1 through 4 are considered non-exempt and are therefore eligible for overtime payment. Note that there may be some employees in certain management development programs that are also non-exempt. If you have any further questions, contact the Acme Human Resources or the Corporate Compensation Department regarding any exempt or non-exempt statuses for job descriptions in your department. Who specifically is eligible for and qualifies for overtime? In most cases, a non-exempt employee is eligible for overtime if they work in excess of 40 hours in one work week, which, by the way, is not the same as a pay period. At Acme, a typical work week is Monday through Sunday. In some states or in some plans where non-exempt employees are covered by a union contract, employees may be eligible for overtime pay after 8, 10, or 12 hours work in a day. Now contact your local HR representative for specific state or location information. There are certain actions that are considered illegal when determining what makes up a 40-hour work week. For example, averaging hours over several weeks to come up with a 40-hour work week is not allowed. If an employee works 44 hours one week and 36 hours the next, that does not constitute an average of a 40-hour work week. Another inappropriate action is allowing off-the-clock work. A supervisor or manager may suggest to leave work time off the record to make a budget or show less expenses. The employee is then offered comp time to make up for it. This is illegal, as it is a violation of the FLSA. Some managers or supervisors may not log overtime as a way of disciplining an employee who has not received approval to work overtime. This is a very serious violation of the FLSA. Probably the most important guideline to remember as a time approver is that if the time is worked, even if not approved, it must be paid. There are more appropriate ways to handle unauthorized overtime. On-call time is considered eligible for overtime if the following criteria are met. On-call time is considered eligible for overtime if the following criteria are met. The employee is waiting at work for a specific task to start. Examples, setting up for an assembly or cleaning up after a shift. Or the employee is required to remain a certain distance from the workplace, respond within a certain time frame, or observe certain restrictions while on call. Or the employee does not use that on-call time for personal reasons. Well, let's say an employee carries the company's cell phone, but is generally free to do whatever they want while on call. At that point, the employee is only paid if they are called to work. But if the employee is required to remain within a certain distance of the workplace, respond within a certain time frame, or observe certain restrictions in their behavior while they are on call, then time will be paid. Training time is considered eligible for overtime if a non-exempt employee is required to attend a lecture, meeting, or training session, or the training event is conducted off-site and requires travel. We will discuss travel in a moment. Acme is not required to pay for training time if the training is voluntary, or no work is performed, or if the training is not required for job proficiency.